So I noticed earlier this morning that the title of the talk was Atlassian Q&A Inside and Out. We couldn't put Confluence questions in the title of the slide, so I almost am a little worried everybody's just going to come here asking questions about Atlassian, which I'm happy to answer those too. We will probably have a few minutes at the end for Q&A. But no, this is going to be about Confluence questions and about Atlassian answers. So as Ryan said, I've got the answers part, and John will do questions, which is really two words for the same technology. Pick whether to call it questions or whether to call it answers. So first, I'll just kind of take you through the structure of what we're going to cover today. I'll give a little introduction about myself, about the background of what I've done at Atlassian, and then really describe for you the formula for how Answers has become a successful platform. And then John will do the same thing for Confluence Questions, our experiment within Atlassian about how Confluence Questions has become a successful platform on an internal instance of questions. And then we're going to kind of take those learnings and give you tips on how you can do this successfully. So first, a little background about myself. I'm Jeremy. I've been at Atlassian for 6 years now. So early on in the San Francisco office, I was a support engineer. I started our knowledge base, so all the knowledge bases that we have for tech support. If you've ever opened a support ticket, you might have gotten some responses from the robot called Hercules, which scans your logs and gives you tips on errors in your logs. I wrote Hercules. I've dabbled in a little plugin development, so I've got some plugins on Marketplace. And actually last year, I did a presentation on using Jira as a service desk. So now it's really a service desk, but I did a lot of tweaking to our instance of Jira, support.atlassian.com. But mostly what I've been working on and what I'm really going to focus on today is Atlassian Answers. I've been running Atlassian Answers for the last couple years. And that's really what I'm going to focus on. So I'm pretty proud of Answers. I think it's done really well. Just by a show of hands, how many people know Atlassian Answers? Oh, okay, great. Everyone in the room. Great. Yeah, so Answers has kind of hit its critical mass. We've had 2.2 million visitors since it's been launched, which is a pretty big number. I think we have about 15 million customers, so many customers have visited Answers. We have over 50,000 questions in there, which is about 150 questions a day. So it's kind of going pretty rapidly. We have a 90% answer rate, which Mike mentioned in the keynote. Stack Overflow, by contrast, is a 77% answer rate, and Stack Overflow is kind of the one. So I feel like Answers is doing pretty well there. 40% are answered in under an hour, which is better than our support team does. So you're more likely to get a faster answer on Answers than you are by opening a support ticket. And that's what kind of makes it its success. So this is, for those of you who've been around long enough, you might remember our old forums. Just to kind of give you a sense of what has happened in the industry, Q&A as a solution kind of came around a few years ago. And before that, we had forums. There's still forums around, but Q&A has been an evolution over the top of forums. So you saw this also in Mike's presentation. He mentioned it too. I get lost in Quora. This is my favorite one. Who's the world's greatest living badass and why? You just can keep getting more and more of these in Quora. And Quora's done a great job of kind of giving themselves an identity of the type of questions that you would ask there. And then the other kind of big one is Stack Overflow. This is kind of the key site for any programming questions. And these, I think both of these together have kind of made a new story for the forums to Q&A migration. And now Q&A sites have really become more popular in the last few years. So just to back up for a second, this is the platform that we're using for Atlassian Answers is called Open Source Questions and Answers. 2.5 years ago, we didn't have Confluence questions. So we went out to go look around to see what's our best choice to do to move from forums to a Q&A solution. And this was the one we picked. It was open source questions and answers. This looks a lot different than what Answers looks like now. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that we did to build open source questions and answers into what Atlassian Answers is today. And really, I think what happens is when you see these sites, Stack Overflow, Quora, even Oscar, you look at it and you go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to be able to ask questions and just have the answers be crowdsourced and appear. But this isn't really just a tool. This is an experience. And what you're really after is the experience of getting your questions answered in a crowdsourced way. And how do you build that community is really the key question. And that's actually what I think is the key takeaway actually here is how do you do that? How do you make this community? It's not just put the tool out and it'll magically happen. So in order to answer that, I think you need to figure out what are you doing. If you think about Quora, they figured out what are they doing. Stack Overflow figured out what are they doing. Answers is a particular thing and figured out what are you doing. So we had to understand why do we need answers. Atlassian's growing fast. Our support team was growing fast. And we knew that we needed to scale that. If you've ever opened a support ticket for an add-on, a lot of those add-ons that aren't made by Atlassian, we don't cover in support. So we needed a way to get people answers for their questions about add-ons. Atlassian has a self-service model. The sales model is self-service. So it kind of makes sense to have a support model that's self-service. So that fits our model. And then so too with allowing customers to help themselves. So that self-service model kind of extends into self-help. And then last but not least, the community is really powerful. So while we're scaling fast, and that's a challenge, one of the advantages to that is that we've got this really amazing community that all is kind of eager to help each other. You can feel some of that here at Summit, that energy of customers willing to help each other. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction, and now I kind of want to move into understanding why we want to do this. Now I think that moves into how are we going to do it? What's the magic behind what made Answers successful? So this is where we started. How do you create answerers? It's going to be easy to bring the questions in. People have questions, but how does that magic happen of people wanting to answer? Who are those people that are going to want to come answer? Because the questions are going to come. So we really figured out how do we build answerers? How do you create answerers? So this is, to begin to answer that question, I kind of want to take you through a little bit of history. This is just a screenshot from Google Analytics of the history of page hits growth in answers. So you can really see over time the building of it. It really just kind of grows and grows naturally. Now, Atlassian is growing during these 2.5 years, but this is much more rapidly outpacing the growth of Atlassian during this phase. And I kind of want to highlight different phases. So in the beginning, I think there was some natural growth. It's just getting started. People are kind of discovering it. And some of these gamification features are beginning to take over. So I kind of want to focus on that a little bit. You've heard gamification. It's kind of a buzzword in the industry. And I wanted to take you through a few examples of what gamification means. There's 3 or 4 different elements to it. And I think this is what was responsible for kind of the early growth of the Answers community. So we called it some kind of point system. We called it Karma in Answers. And as you do activities on the site, you're rewarded with these points, right? So this is kind of the first element of gamification is to add karma, reputation model. For those of you who were in Answers in the early days, you might have got this original T-shirt, the Karma King and Karma Queen. Just curious by a show of hands, who got this original T-shirt? A few of you. Okay, there's a few of you in the crowd. We weren't very good at sending these T-shirts out, so we actually got a lot better with our new with the swag store. But this is another gamification element. We added it makes it fun. It's a little bit fun, a fun element to earning karma, and then you get swag. We also had backpacks, and then we added jackets. So we're trying to just make it fun. The second gamification element is badges. You'll see these on a lot of different sites. So you can, it's kind of more of a video game type element. And you can earn badges for different kinds of activities that you do. So that's another way to kind of incentivize people to do the right things in the community. And then the third gamification piece is that certain features get unlocked as you gain more reputation on the site. So you can begin to comment, you can begin to edit posts, you can begin to retag them as you earn more reputation. In fact, we have, once you earn enough reputation, you can ban spammers. So we just kind of, you grow and grow over time until you can kind of do more things, and it kind of keeps you incentivized to keep going. So I think those gamification features were what was responsible for getting some of the early growth. People kind of got interested in it, and answers started to grow. But at a certain point, we hit a bit of a plateau, and our answer rate was a little bit lower than we wanted it to be, and we thought that it needed a little bit of a push. So this kind of middle phase, we really got the support team to jump onto answers, and we really gave it that extra push. We motivated them to go do it. So we really tasked it to a team. And those of you who've been on answers might know the team. It's Joe Clark and Dennis, and the two of them really, it is their job to be on answers and answering questions full time. Also, the support team kind of has a part-time role in it, so they do a few questions here and there. Added up, over 100 support engineers is a bunch of answers. So that push was kind of, yeah, there's gamification and there's a natural tendency to get a bunch of answerers through that, but then it needed an extra push, at least in our case, and I think in a lot of communities, it needs an extra push of like, okay, this is your job, go in there and answer. So that's kind of the beginning phase. I think the middle phase, we got to a good push. And then in the end, we really, it was about 6 months ago, I wouldn't say the end, just a kind of achieving critical mass. We really got there, I think, in the last 6 months. We did a redesign, which really gave the site, I think, more elegance and added a few more features. So, for example, we added one more gamification feature. This was the original OSCA leaderboard. Wasn't really very elegant. We turned it into this, which is a much nicer leaderboard, and I think the leaderboards gave us an extra push. People have fun getting themselves on top of the leaderboard, and it's kind of a cool gamification feature. So we really kind of gave that a little bump. We also made this into a mobile site. So those kinds of features gave it that, I think, that final push, and we're going to use some of these to inform what we do with Confluence questions. Confluence questions will be actually probably better designed, but at least we made a big leap from OSCA to answers. So just to kind of summarize what I think the three takeaways from building an external community, question and answer community. It takes time. So we definitely built over time. It gets to a critical mass on its own. So just be aware of that when you launch a community, that it grows in people's awareness. They have a first good experience. They ask a question, they get an answer. Then they start asking another question, they get an answer. And then they start answering, and it kind of grows on itself till it hits a critical mass. And then the second piece is make it fun. We did that with t-shirts and with the gamification elements. I think they're really tied in together. Crowdsourcing and making it fun are really a good pair. And then even though it's fun, it also can be part of your job. So make it someone's job, make it fun and a job. Your job can be fun, and I think you have a really good combo. So we found people who loved it and made it their job, and that combination, I think, really worked. So those are my three key takeaways from building an external community. And now I'll hand it over to John to talk about what we did in our internal instance of questions.
Thanks, Jeremy. So Jeremy did a great job explaining how Atlassian Answers grew, and he gave us a lot of learnings. And let's talk about how we put those into practice with Confluence questions. And then I'll leave you guys with some advice about how to make a questions platform successful internally in your own organization. So first of all, who am I? I do product marketing for Confluence. You might have seen me in some product videos or things like that. Kind of my favorite thing that I've done is this InfoQuest infographic, which if you haven't seen, you should definitely check it out because it's very cool. So now I'm going to talk about the magic behind questions and then how you can do it. So people are at work and they have questions and they need answers. It's just kind of a normal way to exchange information, and a lot of times you can't move on until you get the answer. So first I have a question for all of you. How many of you, and if you could just raise your hands and keep them up, have ever gotten a question from a colleague in your email? Okay, everyone basically. And what about on chat? Do you have chat windows popping up with questions during the middle of your day? Yeah, so thanks, you can put your hands down, but that's just about everybody. It's a really common way to ask questions. You're not alone. 60% of people instinctively email or instant message their colleagues whenever they have a question, rather than going to look for the answer themselves. Let me ask you another question. Do you like answering those questions? Is it a part of your day that you enjoy? Some people are, shaking their heads. Some people are nodding yes. Or is it kind of a nuisance? I personally find that a lot of questions come in, and it's kind of an interruption. Perhaps it's not as bad as that time Kanye interrupted Taylor Swift at the VMAs, but it still breaks up your workflow. It hinders your productivity. So what's wrong? People need to ask questions, but the way we do it really isn't that effective. Now, I think this is because the way we ask questions now traps knowledge. So as you'll see, a huge percentage of the information exchange at work is done in email. And even more is done in chat. And that continues to grow. The problem is no one can see the answers to those questions. So you get repetitive questions. You might be answering the same question over and over, but that knowledge is trapped. We kind of solve part of this with Confluence, right? Confluence is a great platform to push knowledge out. If you want to publish a blog post or a page, you can push it out, and your colleagues can find that. They can comment on it, et cetera. But Confluence isn't ideally suited for pulling knowledge in. So asking that question and getting an answer from your colleagues. So that's why we built Confluence Questions. The great thing about it is that it sits right on top of Confluence. So people are already in Confluence sharing knowledge, and they don't have to go somewhere else. It's just seamlessly integrated. I'm going to show you kind of how that works. So with Jeremy's learnings in mind, he came down to Sydney. We talked about what we wanted to build, and we boiled it down to a couple essential features that we thought would really make this work. So the first one is the ability to organize questions with topics. So you can tag a question with a topic, you can browse topics, and you can watch them. The second is to integrate with the social features already present in Confluence. So you need to connect questions with the people that are going to answer them, and we had to have social features like @mentions and sharing to do that. And then finally, we wanted to put in some basic gamification, things like voting and leaderboards, so that people get rewarded for providing answers, and it goes to that make it fun thing that Jeremy was talking about. So once we built this product, we did what we always do, and we rolled it out internally at Atlassian. We like to dog food our own products, and this was a great example of it. So when we did that, it was a bit of an experiment. We didn't know what was going to happen. We'd seen this example of Atlassian Answers, and that was really successful, but we didn't know what was going to happen in an internal instance. We'd never done this before. So what happened? First, there were just a couple questions. People started to come in. They would ask a question, another question, and then a couple answers. Most of the questions that were asked got answered pretty quickly, and it started to take off. After just a couple weeks, we were really happy with it. There were tons of questions in there on all kinds of different topics, and I think we can say it's been a great early success. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of questions that were asked at Atlassian and what features made sure that happened. So I want to start with an example of one of our Atlassian values. We take these really seriously. It's one of my favorite parts of working at the company. And one in particular is open company, no bullshit. And what that means is, you can kind of go up to anyone and get their opinion about something. Mike and Scott are extremely accessible. I'm sure all of you have experienced that with them walking around the conference. Hopefully you've had a chance to chat with them. And in this particular example, I'm going to show you how Scott used Confluence questions. So if you were to go in the Atlassian instance of Confluence questions and go to the topic screen, you'd see a founder's topic. And if you were to click through, you'd see a bunch of questions in there. But one of the recent ones was, what questions can I answer at the September Sydney All-Staff? So we have these monthly meetings where the whole company gets together. There's one in Sydney and one in San Francisco. And the founders, Mike and Scott, or our president, Jay Simons, answers questions that people submit. Normally we do this with just an online form, but Scott decided to ask it in Confluence questions and get people to ask questions that way. So he's got this question up here. He's tagged it with topics, founders, and all staff so people can find it. And then he started to get a bunch of questions, which were actually answers and questions. So it's a little bit meta, but stick with me here. So they were coming from all over the company. We had Michael come in, he's a dev lead, and he asked about what we should keep doing and what we should stop doing. Sharif, one of the Confluence product managers, was able to comment on that question and add a little bit of input that he agreed and wanted to have some other things answered. Dominic from engineering asked about our competitors. We had Dana, a director of risk in the finance department. She asked about a possible future IPO. And Brad, a systems architect, asked about some of our board members who wanted to know a little bit more about that. So what this shows is that people from all over Atlassian were using this. It wasn't just one team. It was people asking all kinds of questions on all kinds of topics in response to Scott's question. And that's great. You can easily get questions from the crowd this way. But what about the people that didn't have questions? They're still able to participate and give some feedback. And they do that through voting. So as you can see here, you've got three questions that were also put on Scott's question. And they've all got 6 votes. So if Scott's running out of time, he might not be able to answer all of them. But what people can do is they can vote, and the system just reorders the questions based on the top votes. And you'll see that the best ones rise to the top. So in this example, it was a way for Scott to get feedback about which questions he should answer. Now, in a traditional, I'm going to ask a question and get a couple answers. One of them might be better than another. That's where voting really helps out because you can see what is the best answer to the question from the crowd. So that's the first example. Mike and Scott have a lot of knowledge, and this is a great way to connect with the executives and get that from them. But what about people that are just starting? We've got a lot of new hires at Atlassian. We're growing tremendously fast. And those people have a lot of questions. So I'm going to give you one example. There was a new guy started on the Confluence team named Isaac, Confluence development team. And he had some questions starting out, because like any new hire, he has questions. Now we've got Anna, who's a Confluence developer as well, and she's an Atlassian veteran. She's been around for a bunch of years. She knows her team inside and out and the company. So she would be a great resource for Isaac. So what that team decided to do was put those questions right in Confluence questions so that they could store the knowledge there. So this was the question that Isaac asked. He said, what are some great links and resources for a new developer? He put it in there. He tagged it with some topics, new hire and development, because we instruct new hires to put the new hire tag on there so that people can find them. And on the reverse side of that, it allows people to watch topics. So just like you can watch a page in Confluence now and get notifications when people make edits to that page, you can also watch topics within Confluence questions to get notified when new questions are posted or new answers are posted. Now this is great because it allows you to keep track of a topic that you might be interested in, or if you're knowledgeable about a subject, it's a great way to stay informed and share your knowledge with other people. So all you have to do when you go into a topic is just click the watch button, and you'll start getting those notifications. So Anna, in this example, was watching the development topic, and she got a notification that Isaac had asked this question in her email. Click through, and boom, she's got an answer for him. So she's got a bunch of helpful links in there to their Jira, to some Bitbucket repos, and some Confluence pages that he should check out. And as you'll see, it's got a couple of votes. So other people on the team voted up her answer and validated that it was a good one. So I think that's a good example of how you can use questions within a team to share knowledge and get a new hire up to speed faster. In particular, this is helpful because Anna won't have to answer that question next time. They can just find it. So that brings me to the final thing, which is how do you take advantage of the fact that this knowledge is stored? And for this one, I've got a personal example. So in the last slides, you saw pictures of Isaac and Anna, which I got off of our internal directory. So we have something called a directory.atlassian.com that we use for our internal directory. And when I was in there, I was like, I don't know if I have a photo in the Atlassian directory. I searched myself. Lo and behold, I don't have a photo. But I had no idea how to fix this. It was one of those questions that everyone seems to have, no one really knows the answer, and I don't know how to find out. So what I do, as I always do when I don't know something at work, I went to Confluence and I searched. And as you'll see here in the quick nav, questions show up right in search results, right in the quick nav, or if you were to go on the search results page, you'd see them there as well. So in this particular example, you can see the top result. You can kind of read it. It says, how can I update my photo? And it was a question. So without even realizing it, I click through, and I'm in Confluence questions. Someone had already asked this. A guy named Christoph, who I've never met. He's another Atlassian. We're getting pretty big now, so you don't know everyone. But he'd already asked this question, and there were 4 answers, which was like totally mind-blowing for me. And there were a couple different ones. There was some debate about who was the right person to talk to about this. And Ryan and Julian, these 2 guys that answered the question here, both of them weren't quite sure who was the right person to talk to about the photo. So what they did is they mentioned some colleagues, Jeff Sinclair and John Rottenstein, to bring them into the question. So Ryan thought that Jeff was the right guy to talk to. He mentioned him. And Jeff gets a notification. He comes in and is able to vote up the answer and validate it. So mentions and these social features that I talked about are a great way to bring people in just using the Confluence features that you're already used to. So here I was. I got the answer to my question. I didn't have to interrupt anyone. And it took about 30 seconds. And now I've got a photo. So I think this seems like a really simple and almost trivial example. But if you think about it, how would I have done this before? I probably would have asked 3 or 4 or 5 people. I might have hip chatted them. I might have just tapped them on the shoulder. I might have gotten an answer to my question, but I might not have, and I might have just given up. But the problem with that is I would have interrupted a bunch of people. I would have wasted my time. I would have wasted their time, and I wouldn't have had a good outcome. With Confluence questions, in about 30 seconds, I had the answer, and I was able to take action and move on with my day. So I just think it's really awesome once you start to see the power of this to answer questions that you didn't even, that you wouldn't be able to answer otherwise. So the list goes on. We have tons of other questions in there. Everything from new hire topics to things like David's question about the nut bar in the level 6 kitchen. I guess he was missing his walnuts and almonds, but he got a real answer to this question too. So let's talk about how you can do this in your organization. So there's a couple features that really help get this going. The first are around discovery. So it's topics like we talked about. Tagging questions with topics helps people find new questions and also connect questions with the people that are going to answer them through watching them. You can also search, as I pointed out. It's a great way to get people looped in, and they won't even realize what's happening, but they'll all of a sudden just be in Confluence questions, and they'll be like, this is great. And then finally, questions and answers also will show up in the Confluence popular tab next to other popular pages and blogs. So if there's a really popular question, it'll show up there, and then curious people will just click through. Next set of things is through connecting questions with the people who are going to answer them. So that's app mentions, like I talked about, great way to loop in your colleagues, and also watching topics. So you get notifications every time a new question is posted in a topic you're interested in. And then finally, there's validation. So how do you know that the answer you got is the right one? Well, you've got voting. So that's a really great feature, so you can see the best answer and see it rise to the top. And then you've also got experts, which is something we're really excited about, seeing how that grows, so you can see who has what knowledge within your organization. I don't know if you guys remember back to Mike's slide the other day, but he kind of showed a brain being developed of mapping all the knowledge within your organization, and we're really excited to see how experts plays out. So those are the critical features that I think will help spur adoption within your organizations. But there's a couple other pieces of advice that I want to leave you with. So number one is to think long term. This is a Google Analytics screenshot, similar to Jeremy's, but this one is actually of Confluence questions at Atlassian in the last 6 weeks or so. So you got to go in, set the expectation that it's going to take time, and you're not going to build a community overnight, but it will happen. Next, we saw a lot of success with seeding content. When we rolled out Confluence questions in Atlassian, we didn't make a big noise about it. We didn't blog about it. We didn't email the company. We got a couple people to seed topics with some questions. So they had some content in there. It provides a good example for people to work from. You also need to enlist the help of your colleagues. So that's seeding content, like I talked about, get people in different areas, from internal experts, one person an expert on Confluence, one person is an expert on HR topics, et cetera. So get them involved, and get your execs involved. We've seen really great response to questions that Scott and Jay and Mike pose, and it's, I think they really like it too, because it provides them a channel with which to connect with their employees. And finally, you got to identify existing incentives, the whole teach a man to fish story. As you saw in our examples that I showed, Anna was motivated to answer Isaac's questions in Confluence questions because there's going to be other new developers on her team, and she wants them to be able to find that knowledge. So she's already dealing with these questions, and it makes her life easier. I know our HR team and our talent team really like this because they're onboarding all these new hires, and they get the same questions over and over and over. So if you find those kind of people that have these existing incentives, that get a lot of questions and want to reduce their workload, those are great people to enlist. And just remember, it's going to take time. Let it happen. There's some great features in there that I think will really spur people to engage with Confluence questions. And I think people are curious, and the community will grow over time. So that's it. I just want to say thanks to all of you for listening to us. And please go sign up for the beta at atlassian.com/questions. We'd love to hear your feedback. We have had a couple questions about the availability of the beta. It is available right now from Marketplace. It's only compatible with Confluence 5.3 and later for download customers. We will be coming out with it in on-demand pretty soon, and we'll also be coming out with pricing in the next couple months before our 1.0 launch, which will be sometime early 2014. So thanks again, and we will take questions.
I got one right here.
All right, so a couple things have been announced. So you've got a knowledge base and you've got answers. Can you promote accepted answers to the knowledge base so that they could be searchable from the help desk application and things like that?
So that's a great question. It's talking about the integration between Jira Service Desk, the Confluence knowledge base, and Confluence questions. And those three don't all talk to each other right now, but I think that's something that we could definitely see happening down the road. People are going to ask helpful questions in there. I think people are going to ask questions in Jira Service Desk, and you'll see those answers within the Service Desk. And knowledge base recommends articles when you're searching for things in Service Desk. So those two are hooked up already if you get Jira Service Desk and you hook it up with Confluence Knowledge Base. But Confluence Questions is separate from those.
Yeah, and I think the other half of that question is the user experience around where do I ask my question? Do I put it in Service Desk or do I put it in Questions? And that we'll work on that UX too, but not in this first release.
So my question is very similar. What's the strategy of which information should live in which system? Confluence versus knowledge base versus answers versus Service Desk?
Sure. So that's a great question. And I think we're taking the same strategy that we take with Confluence, which is we think there are a lot of great ways to use it. And companies use Confluence very differently. So I think in one company, Confluence Questions might look more like Stack Overflow internally, depending on if teams are using it that way, or it might look more like Quora. But to answer your question specifically, what questions belong in Confluence Questions versus Service Desk versus Answers? So Answers is an external Q&A platform, so that's for all of our customers. Confluence Questions lives internally within your organization. And I think it's more for questions like that you would ask your colleagues, whereas Service Desk is more like IT type questions. So like, I need to print, whereas Confluence Questions would be like, some of the examples that I gave.
So the example you gave with how do I update my picture?
Yeah.
Would not that be a part of your Confluence HR policy or somewhere documented already? Why did it have to be a part of the answers versus just your regular HR documentation?
I think what we're seeing is kind of funny. Jeff Sinclair could have gone and written a knowledge base article about it, but he just never did it, right? I don't know why he never did it. He probably should have, because he kept getting questions like this all the time. And yeah, he probably should have gone and written it down. But it's just, the questions invites a different behavior. It's just all those things that aren't filled in quite. There it is in a question, it comes to you, and just that question and answer dynamic is a different experience than, all right, I'm going to go proactively think to write a knowledge base article.
Yeah. It's like the push versus pull
Yeah.
example. And I think in particular, like with Confluence, like you could have a Confluence page that explains that. But what Questions is really good about doing is very specific pieces of knowledge. You might have to look through a page, you might have to read a whole page. This is like, I have a specific question, bam, now I have an answer. I can work on it.
We have, we have all of our documentation on confluence.atlassian.com, but we also have 50,000 questions of how do I configure this? What's the exact? I have a specific variation on this documentation or this slice of information, so just provides a different perspective. And then I think the Service Desk piece is I need something done, and it's a ticket. Oh, got someone over there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I have a distributed team that they're not sitting in front of the computer all day. Do you see a way of using answers are they getting alerted that there's a question out there that needs to be answered, and on their phones, would they see that? Is there anything like that as part of the questions?
Yeah, so there's no mobile app or anything that specific, but you can watch topics. So if you want to make sure that your team gets notified when new questions are asked, you could have them go in there and watch the topics, and they'll get an email notification just as they would if they were watching a page in Confluence. So that's a way to notify people. You can also share questions directly with your colleagues, and they'll get a similar notification.
Yeah.
You talked about seeding the content. When you implement the questions, how did you come up with your topics? And then do you need to establish those right when you implement, and then can you add more topics as you evolve and you get more content? And can a question go into multiple topics?
Yeah.
Want to take that one?
Yep. So topics are up to the users. So there's no limited number. You can specify. You could put 5 topics on one question, and you can create new topics. It does suggest topics for you, so that helps prevent duplication. But yeah, it's totally up to the user. You can create as many topics as you want. Yeah, it's exactly like labels. It's the same concept. Indeed.
Yeah, I don't know if we've done that yet, but I suspect topics and labels will be tightly integrated.
What's your best practice for handling duplicates, like duplicate questions? Do you flag them as a duplicate a bit like we would do in Jira, or would you go as far as to delete them because it's so similar? You know what I mean?
I don't know where we are
Yeah,
in the
so-
beta, but in Answers, there is that feature, so you can close for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah, so in Confluence Questions, there isn't that feature yet, but it's something that we're obviously going to have to tackle because you're going to get duplicate questions. But we think it'll be probably something where you can like merge it in.
Yeah.
So you can, if you have helpful content in two places, you can combine it.
The other piece to that is, again, I don't know if we've done this in the beta yet, but the ask question form is probably going to have type ahead, just like the quick search has. So to the degree that that's going to work, you're going to see the existing questions.
We've got time for one more question.
Question about pulling questions into Confluence content. Are any macros you guys are planning to be, so like if I wanted to build a Q&A page that has a specific set of questions that maybe a department's getting asked, any vision for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that's already a feature
yeah,
request on
so
it.
we're going to have that. So you'll be able to embed questions right in a page, and you can also just put an ask a question button right on the page. So you can ask a question right from there if you want to organize. One of the examples in Bill Arcanati's section of the Confluence State of the Union was exactly that. We had a page about Summit. There were frequently asked questions that the organizers had put in there, and then we embedded questions from Confluence Questions on that topic. Thanks so much again for coming, and I'll stick around. Jeremy will stick around if you guys have questions. Other questions.